Good evening, everyone. We will probably have many more people coming in to fill these seats because we actually have registrations for every seat. So you'll need to make room when they come in. But we thought we would honor the fact that you got here on time. And so we're going to start on time. I'm George Mason. I'm the president of Faith Commons, and we're happy to host this event. I want to say a special thank you to Dr. Timothy Peoples, who is the current pastor of this church, the senior pastor of Wilshire Baptist Church, where I served before him for quite a long time. And it's lovely that they still welcome me and us in these sorts of events, but we really are grateful. I mean, this church has an incredible spirit and passion for justice and peacemaking and continues to do so, and we thank the staff. Numbers of them have been responsible for helping us get this together. Some of them are here in the room, but Tim, if you will communicate that to them, our gratitude for all their good hard work, we really appreciate it. As we begin, I'll make introductions in just a moment. But I do want to say thank you to the staff and to the board of Faith Commons. A number of them are here, and we're grateful for their participation and encouragement. But to begin with, I am instructed to read to you what my partner Nancy Caston has told me I should do as we introduce this event. So, if I can find it, I will do just that. Aha. So the ongoing devastation in Gaza and the West Bank is part of what brings you here, right? The impact that it's had on Israel, it has caused both Palestinians and Israelis harm and suffering. This moment demands, we think, a moral and political reckoning. Ending this cycle of violence and addressing at the same time the broader struggle for justice and a just peace in Israel and Palestine requires also confronting deeply rooted racism, dehumanization, and narratives of domination. And that's not only about what's happening there, but about what's happening here in the United States. So this program, we hope, will serve as a contribution, a first step toward fostering a principled, collaborative response to the situation in Israel-Palestine, and also one that will challenge antisemitism, anti-Palestinian racism, anti-Arab and anti-Muslim bigotry, and the U.S.'s current approach to domestic and global security. That's a lot to do, and we're going to do it in an hour and a half, I think. Just about that, right? So for many of you, this is deeply personal because you have family members, perhaps certainly friends, who have been affected by the war in Gaza since October 7th, and certainly before that in many other ways. I was in the West Bank, in Bethlehem, in the days leading up to that, and in Jerusalem on October 7th. And some of our party from Faith Commons who were going to be on a trip were there with me. Others couldn't make it because their planes were stopped. So having been there in the midst of that time, there is a lot of emotion for many of us still about that. But we thought we would do our best in this time that we have together to take a deep breath, to take a step back, to try to think together, talk together, reason together, and find a path forward together with all honesty and courtesy. We know that you will be respectful in this time, that there may be things that you will disagree with that are said tonight, but we ask you to be courteous in that respect, There may be questions that you have. The way the evening will go, we'll have our presenters. I'll ask as the moderator a few questions of them, and they'll respond. You have, many of you, cards in your hand and a pen. If you have a question that you would like to have posed, please write it, and someone will pick that up, and then they'll collate them and bring them to me, and I'll ask the panel. But please be aware that we're probably not going to be able to get to everyone's questions, so we'll try to do the best we can in that regard. So let's take a moment and breathe, huh? Deep breath. Allow the Spirit to fill us with love and peace, and to lead us in a right path. Amen. And now I want to introduce to you these who are our guests tonight. First of all, I'll start with my partner at Faith Commons, Rabbi Nancy Kasten, who is the Chief Relationship Officer. She is a rabbi in the Reformed Jewish tradition and has been here in Dallas for 35 years now, along with her husband David Stern, who is the senior rabbi at Temple Emmanuel, and thank you for being here also. Nancy is the genius behind this effort, and we thank you for envisioning this and helping us to pull this off. And then Rania Batrice is the president of Batrice and Company. It is a public relations firm and more, and she is a Palestinian advocate and a deeply concerned social justice advocate who helps these movements in various ways, and we thank you for being here also. They'll introduce themselves and their experience more in a moment. And then this is Dr. Nimr Ikram, and he is an orthopedic surgeon practicing in the Plano area and has made trips to Gaza and has a deep concern for what's happening there, and he has a presentation that will start us off. And Dr. Ikram, we turn it over to you at this time. Thank you.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank Nancy for reaching out to me when she heard that I went and offered me this opportunity to meet with all of you. And thanks you again, everyone, for here. I think, the main idea is that we're trying to figure out how, again, we can serve humanity. First and foremost, I'd like to say I am going to put a timer on my phone just to make sure I don't overgo, because I can talk for hours and hours. So we'll start that way, because Nancy said 10 to 15 minutes. But first and foremost, for starters, so peace and blessings to everyone who is here. So like they said, I'm an orthopedic surgeon here in Dallas, Texas. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. My folks are from Pakistan. I grew up in Michigan all my life. Moved down here Christmas of 2012. I just got sick and tired of the cold. I'm like, I need someplace warm to go. So to be like, you got to come to Dallas. I'm like, absolutely. So thank God came down here. And so, I've been doing medical missions probably for about 20 years. So I went to Haiti after the earthquake, I think it was in 2009. I went to Guatemala on a regular mission. I've been to Pakistan. And so when I moved down here, I was with a group, and then about 2 years later, I went on my own. So I was on my own for about 10 years, and then about 2 years ago, I'm like, I want to get back to doing what I want to do. Again, God has blessed me with a skill set to help humanity. So I joined a group 2 years ago so that I have people who can cover for me and I can go do these things. So one of my friends reached out to me. I think it was November of 2023 after this had started. And he's like, hey, obviously as an orthopedic surgeon, you deal with trauma. And so, we're looking for people to go. There's a group who's going in March of 2024, would you be interested? I go, absolutely. March, this is going to be done and over. We're going to be all good. We have, I'm golden, And so I gave, all my information to the group probably December, and then they reached out to me at the end of December, and they're like, the person who was supposed to go has a Palestinian background, and so they're not allowing him to go. So we have a whole team, but we don't have an orthopedic surgeon now. So would you be willing to go January? So I'm like, wow, okay. Again, it's not a decision for myself. I mean, I have a wife, I have 4 kids, And so I said, the conflict is still going on here. Do I go? Do I not go? So of course I sat down with the wife and kids, and I said, this is the situation. Again, I've been chosen, to go there to help out humanity. There is an active, conflict going on right now. I am going to Rafah, and at that time it was the safe zone. It hadn't been, entered, by Israel. So I said it should be safe. We do everything with the World Health Organization, the UN. They know everything. Wherever we move, we have to tell Israel beforehand, so we should be good. And they said, again, realistically, everyone has to go. And again, our time is limited here on earth, and again, only God knows when we're supposed to go. So I said, if my time to go is January 15th, 2024, is it better for me to be serving humanity and, helping people who are less fortunate, or is it better to me be hanging out here in Plano, and passing away here? So of course, the family, the wife and kids, like, no, yeah, you have something that they need there, so go ahead and go. So the first time I went was January of 2024. And so I went for about 2 weeks, and a lot of these slides and the videos are from then. So we went to Cairo, we flew into Cairo. The next day we met with the World Health Organization and the UN, and of course they do their spiel. It's like, this is an active war zone. We're not going to take any responsibility. You may not return. And we all said, yes, we understand this. But again, we're here, to help humanity. So then the next day, we leave at 6 a.m. in the morning, and so then there's multiple checkpoints, going to Rafah, the border there. So we left about 6 a.m. and then we end up getting there about 8 p.m. at night. So it was about a 14-hour trip, and there was multiple different NGOs there. I think there was about 16 different cars/vans that went there. So the first video is, when we are getting close to the border, the one thing that we see here is, again, just miles and miles of aid trucks that are on the side of the road here. And again, we're like, in this day and age, we're talking about 2024 at that time, it is right on the corridor, right next to where it's needed. There's so much need there, and the world has, given so much stuff, and unfortunately, it's sitting on the side of the road and not being able to enter. So that was one of the first things that, that we had seen. So then we entered, like I said, it was dark when we entered. So as we're driving, again, there's no electricity there. So we just have the vans, lights going. So we see kind of, all these tents and things. And so like, what is this? And so the next morning when we go from the safe house to the hospital, I mean, this is the picture that we see. Just miles and miles of tents. And because at that point, the north had been, everyone in the north was told to come to the south. And obviously, there's no buildings for everyone who was there. So everyone had given tents, and so this was January, remember? And so, like I said, we were in a safe house. We were able, we had we had walls. We didn't have heat inside there, but at the same point, there was walls. I had a little flat little mattress to sleep on, but they gave me, I brought my sleeping bag. They gave me 2 blankets. I had my sweatshirt on, everything of that sort. And still, I was kind of cold at night. And I'm thinking, these people are sleeping out with a tent. This is all that they have. Again, I don't know if obviously they're on the ground, so they don't even have the mattress that I had. I don't know what kind of, they didn't really have any wood to make fire or anything of that sort. So I'm thinking, I'm inside, I'm cold, what are these people going through? So then the next day we get to the hospital here, and we're walking through the hospital, and the things that we notice is that this hospital, like I said, unfortunately, even the hospitals have been targeted there, and they were the only, quote, safe zone at that point. So the hospital had capacity for 300 patients, and there was at least 1,000 patients there. And that was bad enough, but at the same point, as we're walking through the hallways here, as we're walking through the hallways, they're allowing families to stay here. Because again, outside it's not safe, so they say at least here they may be safe. And so you see here, I mean, they just have a sheet that they make, in the middle of the hallways. They have one way that you can still pass, but on the sides here, again, everyone has their own little sheet, their own little area they want to call their own. So for me to come from the United States, that we deal with, that we have clean hospitals and wide open things and no one can stay there. This is kind of eye-opening to me. And even at the end when we get there, even just in the stairwell, people were staying there just to find some little area that they can call their own and for some peace and security. And then, like I said, I have 4 kids, and so the next morning we get to the hospital, and we're just all these kids kind of inundate us, and you would think that we're coming from the U.S. And again, that they would be like, you guys are terrible. You guys are doing this to us. They were so welcoming. They're like, thank you. And like all the kids like knew 3 words. They'd be, hi, what's your name? How are you? Kind of deal. And again, they have these smiles on these faces, and they're so welcoming. And we're like, this is surreal. That, again, you guys are going through this. But for them, I mean, this is what they've grown up with, unfortunately, with war and destruction. And so again, these 2 of the nurses that went with us there. And again, they were just so welcoming. They were just so, thank you for coming, and thank you for trying to help us, doing whatever you can for us. So the other thing was there was just a bunch of people on the side of the street. We're like, who are those people? And they said, oh, they're either waiting for food and for water kind of deal. So because they distribute it, whenever they have some things. And I'm thinking, if these people haven't had food or water in forever, how can they be standing in a line waiting their turn, and then if they get some, they get some. If they don't get some, they don't get some. So I'm like, these people, for me, I'm like, these people have such patience. The what's the word for akhlaq? Perseverance. Yeah, the perseverance that they have, the resilience that they have is amazing. And so I'm thinking, I'm looking at my own kids, and, if they don't get something, when they ask, they're like, why don't I get it kind of deal? And these kids are here. If they get food, they get food. If they don't, they're like, again, this is what's been destined to us. And again, God knows what's best per se. And so, so oftentimes people always say, hey, well, why can't they leave? Why can't they go someplace else? And when you talk about Gaza, it really is an open air prison. So, and I didn't know what that meant until I went there. And so here, as you look at it here, to the picture on the left there, this was, literally, like we were right on the border. That's the border of Egypt and Gaza there. And again, just like jails that we have here, prisons that we have here, you had a big wall. On the top of it, there's barbed wire. Behind that, there's another solid concrete wall. And behind that, there's another 3rd wall. So I was actually just talking to Rania, and she was talking about this march that's going to happen in Cairo. And she said, they're going to march from Cairo to try to enter through Egypt, but there's no way they can enter. Because again, this is what is surrounding everything. So again, when you talk about, that people will, why can't they just cross over? Because this is what's surrounding them. And so, and then, from our standpoint, like I talked to my family, I said, whenever, as a U.S. physician, whenever you're supposed to go anywhere, you have to tell Israel where you're going to make sure that it's safe. And so we always get a red light or a green light. And so again, sometimes we'd have 2 hours before they allow us to go. And so this was one of the times that we were held up for about 2 hours, and they're like, okay, now you have a green light. And so we start driving, and literally, about a block away, a bomb goes off. And so there was a smoke that was, up from there. And then, of course, we go to the hospital, and, there's the casualties that come in through there. And what was surprising is, again, this was at the time that Rafah was considered a safe zone. Again, there shouldn't have been any kind of bombing or anything like that going on there. And so again, these are just, some pictures of actually, the destruction that goes on there. And this was a year ago. Like I said, this was January of 2024. So when I went now in January 2025, I went to the north. And even buildings, like I said, there's a building that's standing back there. Now 90% of all the infrastructure has been, demolished. Even buildings, like I said, the apartments that's standing up there, most of like all the outer walls are gone. And I was blessed to be there for the ceasefire, which is amazing. Because again, finally, like I said, the first time I left, I had survivor guilt because I said, I'm able to leave and these people can't. And it killed all of us that were there. Again, why are we privileged enough to be able to go and these people can't? And so this time when we saw the ceasefire, we're like, oh, this is amazing. Literally that evening, we went to the Mediterranean Sea. We played in the water. I'm like, it's beautiful. I never realized that it was like that. But at the same time, we saw all these high rises in the north where all the outer walls had been blown out. And so people were just, at a different level, just sweeping out, the rubble and trying to make something, that they could call their own at that point. And like I said, just to the right, is a car that has been demolished. So the next slides are very gruesome. So this is what we dealt as physicians. So again, if anyone has any kind, don't want to see, just look away for a bit. But these are things that we were dealing with while we were there. So again, the person to the left, a bomb went off. Again, as an orthopedic surgeon, this is what we deal with day in and day out there. And so one leg was completely blown off. The opposite side had shrapnel everywhere, things of that sort. The middle pictures of someone who his eye was blown off. He has multiple shrapnel wounds. And the top one, the bottom right there is a child who had come in with a single bullet shot to the head. And so, that was very challenging. And again, the parents come in with these children and say, this is my only child, save them. And as a physician, what can we do? So again, I mean, that's unfortunately things that we had seen. And like I said, this was when the conference wasn't supposed to be in Rafah. This is our makeshift OR that we had there, nothing compared to what we have here. And this was one of the better hospitals. This was the European Gaza hospital. So again, it had been funded by Europe, and so it was supposed to be one of the better hospitals. But sterility-wise, like I said, there wasn't much sterility. Antibiotics, there wasn't much even at that time. But again, as a surgeon, you make do with what you have. So again, like the next picture, again, is going to be some surgical pictures, and not as gruesome as the first one, but still, if you don't like blood and things of that sort, look away for a second. So again, this is, like I said, the trauma that we have. Like the guy on the top, I mean, both of his legs were broken, his arm was broken, so we have to put on what's called external fixators to stabilize it until, allow it to heal like that, or until we get other plates and screws or rods that we can put in there to stabilize. So this is a fixation that we do for a while until we can get a more definitive fixation. Like I said, you see the one on the bottom there, they have this wound. The problem is that because there's no antibiotics, because there's limited resources, you bring it back every 48 hours, you think that it can be clean, and then you would do like there's plastic surgeons there, so they would do a flap to cover it. So one day it looks good, you bring it back 48 hours, and then it's infected. So you just keep on doing it until you can get it clean enough to finally close it up. So this was the last day that we were there. And again, like I said, it was absolutely beautiful. But this was the day that they said, okay, we're going to start attacking more. So, I mean, you look out, we were on the veranda, you look out, it's a beautiful day, you see the ocean out there. This is what you hear. I mean, you hear the bombs going off there, you hear them shelling from the Navy. That's the drone that you hear, and that's there pretty much all night long. And again, the drones can either be just for surveillance, so the drones can either be for surveillance, it can be for bombing, or just the noise just keeps you up. And so it's a constant, noise in the background. It's background noise for everyone per se. So again, one of the patients gave me this little seashell, because again, I mean, they're so friendly, they're so thankful, even though they don't have anything to do. So what they do is, like I said, it's a beach side. So they go to the beach, they get these shells, and then they wrote, "From Gaza, with love, despite the pain." And again, you have these kids, again, we're leaving, again, thank you so much, I mean, we love you guys, this and that. So it breaks my heart, because these are normal kids, just like, our kids that are here. And then for them to have to go through all of this, is just, very unfortunate. And like I said, I mean, trying to figure out how we can deal with this. Oops. So I think I kept within my 15 minutes. 15, exactly. Perfect. There you go. So I don't want to take up too much time, but. So again, like I said, we want to make it open for everyone, afterwards. So we have plenty of discussion then. So, good.
My name is Rania Batrice, and I'm actually a first-generation Palestinian American. So George said I'm a Palestinian advocate. I am. I also wake up every day being Palestinian. I work it's very complicated. We were joking about it. Nancy, who I've known for a long time now, was like, sometimes I forget. It's fine. My parents couldn't tell you what I do for a living. It is complicated. So I work in politics and advocacy. That's the short answer. For 25 years now, I have worked at this intersection of electoral politics and policy creation and advocacy. And I was just saying to Nimit, it all feels very disjointed if I went down the list of different things I work on. But really, it all comes back to collective liberation and how our struggles are connected. And just like George said, what's happening in Los Angeles right now and other communities across the country, it's directly connected to exactly what we're talking about here today. The erasure of our LGBTQ allies and friends and family is directly connected to what we're sitting here talking about today. If you care about women, if you care about children, if you care about disability rights, if you care about climate, if you care about justice in any way, shape, or form, That's what we're all sitting here doing today. You might imagine being a Palestinian American woman working in American politics is not a very easy thing to do anywhere, but especially in this country. I don't know if y'all know this, but there's still a lot of misogyny going on around here. Shocking, I know. But I do feel like that's what I'm here for. I do center my Palestinianness in everything that I do, and I also center humanity in everything that I do. And Nimrod was talking about just working on behalf of humanity. He talked about how children, they're kids. And whether you have kids or not, there's probably a child or children in your life that you care about. And I just want everybody in here to imagine for a moment having to crush up bird seed and grass to feed your child. Your child being so hungry, literally being starved to death intentionally, that they cannot cry. They don't have the energy to cry, and that is what we're talking about. And George, I really appreciate mentioned, we're talking about Gaza right now, and that's there are no words. There are no words to articulate the atrocities. And also, there is land theft happening right now in the West Bank, too. And all of this, everything that we're talking about, is not new. And I'm going to just take a point of privilege and say what happened on October 7th was horrendous. Probably everybody in this room can agree to that. I don't believe civilians are off limits, children are off limits. I don't care who they are, where they came from. It was horrendous. And also, this did not start on October 7th. And I just can't impress upon all of us enough how important it is to understand that. Because whether it is propaganda from the Israeli government or from our own media, our media is atrocious. I apologize for anybody in here who might be a member of the press. There are some exceptions, obviously. But and again, that's not new either. The Western media, like investigative journalism in general, has been dead for a very long time in this country. And we are fed these lines over and over and over, and then people regurgitate them as truth, as fact. The number of times I've heard people say to me, and I'm not talking about like the trolls online, that's a thing too, obviously. There's all of that going on. But people have said to me, children aren't really starving to death. They're only targeting Hamas. They're not indiscriminately bombing. And make it make sense, y'all. Make it make sense that if you give a damn about the hostages, how indiscriminately bombing a tiny area is going to get the hostages back. Somebody explain that to me. I mean, don't really, because I don't, if somebody has an explanation, I can't right now. But I feel like, just like you said, we could talk about this for hours and hours. We could go through history since 1948. We could do all of these things. And the reality is, at the end of the day, we're human beings. And can we just start from that place? Can we start from a place of understanding that I have family that I care about, that I worry about every single day, just like you do? And my being Palestinian doesn't make me any less worthy. The Palestinian children in Gaza and in the West Bank and across the northern part of the country too doesn't make them any less worthy. And I feel like if we could start from that place, just this place of just humanity, that we're all citizens of the planet first, that we all occupy the same rock. I mean, for now anyway, because anybody paying attention to climate change, anyway, another conversation for another day. But, we're all connected. We all are connected as human beings in this space and in this place. And I'm not going to take my 15 minutes because I do want to make sure we have time for as many questions as possible. But I just ask that we're going to get into some more details and stuff later, so I promise I have so many more feelings and thoughts. But I just ask that as we sort of move through this conversation, as we move out of this room and this space together, that first and foremost, could we agree that children deserve to live and have food and have safety and security? Can we all agree that human beings in general should have all of those things too? And can we also all just make a commitment to maybe not listening to things that are fed to us? Let's dig a little deeper, shall we? Because there's a lot of lots of propaganda, lots of rules within our own media about what is allowed to be said and what is not, what's allowed to be shown and what's not. It's not fair, frankly. Everybody in here has families and lives and jobs and your own stresses, I have no doubt. So it feels like a lot to ask to say, I need you to dig a little deeper and look a little further and not just take what you're told. But I am going to ask for that favor. And I'm just going to stop there.
So each of us comes to this evening from a different place. And I come from my background as a Jew, as a rabbi, and as an American. I grew up in a secular Jewish home. My parents were first-generation Americans. Their parents were born somewhere in Ukraine, all my grandparents, what would now be Ukraine. And my parents were not observant. We didn't observe anything in our home. We, celebrated big Jewish holidays. We were certainly culturally Jewish. We were not Zionist. We didn't have a lot of discussion about Israel, or we just didn't. I mean, that was not our focus. And my connection really began when I received a scholarship to participate in a 6-month high school exchange program in 1976. The rabbi of my congregation in Boston at the time was a big Zionist, and there was an exchange program that had started a few years before, sending high school juniors over to Israel to live with families and learn Hebrew and live in the Jewish state. And it was transformative for me. I mean, by far the most important life experience I ever had. So I think about it a lot right now because I left JFK Airport for Ben Gurion Airport on June 27th of 1976. And while I was en route to Tel Aviv, an Air France jet from Tel Aviv to Paris was hijacked to the Entebbe airport in Uganda. And the rescue of 102 Israeli hostages was accomplished several days later, and I was at a Ulpan, intensive Hebrew program at a youth village, very, very rustic youth village near the airport. And, we heard about the rescue and all of that, and it was all very exciting and, amazing, right? This was Israel at its best, the Israeli IDF, everything. And it was accomplished in a raid that was led by Yonatan Netanyahu. Yonatan Netanyahu was Benjamin Netanyahu's older brother. And in that case, all the hostages were saved. Yonatan was he was killed. But all the hostages were saved. He went and saved all the hostages. And you think about the irony of that right now, about what his younger brother is doing to save himself, and the numbers of Israelis and Palestinians and others who have been sacrificed for his own self-interest. And, so that was the beginning of my experience. And I have to admit, and I've admitted this to Rania over these years and to other Palestinian friends, that I am so aware of how I was blind to Palestine and Palestinians for so long. I didn't see it. I just didn't see it. I didn't learn about it. I didn't push myself to learn about it. And it was only in the midst of the suicide attacks where I was in Israel several times when the market was bombed and when the buses were bombed and when cafes were bombed, and I was there with my children, and I was there when HUC students were there, and I was helping, sort of counsel them, and I'm like, what is going on here? Like, this is not normal. And only then, like, I remember in 2006, I was there, we were there for several weeks, and it was right before the second Lebanon war started, and I decided to go to the Jerusalem Bethlehem checkpoint with Checkpoint Watch, Mahzon Watch, and Women in Black. And I watched what Palestinians, what Israelis, what Arabs had to do to get across the border to come and mop the floors and build the buildings and all of that. And it was really in 2006 that I began my journey of really being more curious and pushing myself to see what I hadn't yet seen. And I think about that when you talk about how the media is so bad, and I think, you know what, not all the media is bad, but we have to be curious, right? We have to go beyond the headline. We have to scratch the surface. We have to be open to the fact that even with the best of intentions, none of us can know everybody else's stories or express those stories or tell those stories. So as people who do care about every child and think that every child deserves basic protection and that every human being is created in God's image and is, worthy of their basic needs being met or being able to meet their own basic needs, right? We have to push ourselves to say, what am I missing here? What's the story I'm missing? What's the perspective I'm missing? And I keep going back, and this is such a painful thing for me because I went, when I started, I said, I'm American, I'm Jewish, all of that, and all of that has been upended for me, and especially since October 7th. And as you say, it didn't start on October 7th. I was in Israel and Palestine in March of 2023. I marched out, with with all the Israelis who were out protesting the judicial reform. And I was like, why is nobody talking about what's going on in the West Bank? And then I went to the West Bank, and I saw what was going on then in the West Bank, which has only been 1,000 times worse now, right, with undercover of what's going on in Gaza. It didn't start then, but October 7th somehow was like such a trauma. I mean, I'm still processing it. George and Mara can attest to that, as they are too, but such an identity shaker, both in terms of how I really came to Judaism, which was through the land, and then how my Jewish community has responded. So and feeling like we're inadequate to this task, and what does that say about the future of Judaism, the future of our people? And so, I'm really grateful for this conversation because I can't process this by myself. And that's why I reached out to you. And I feel like, maybe the people in this room also feel that way, that they can't process it by themselves, that they need to hear from other people, that they need to be able to have conversations that they feel like they haven't been able to have, that they need to watch things that are really horrible to watch and uncomfortable to watch. And, and then move on from here, and let's see, how we can make things better instead of just continuing to make things worse.
We have a brief video called The Path Forward that we're going to show at this time.
Do you want to say a word about it while he's getting set?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to say just a little bit. So I actually am executive producer on this film. There are a number of people that are followed from a variety of backgrounds, doing a number of different things. Two that I want to, and full disclosure, I haven't watched the trailer in a really long time, so I can't remember who's in this and who's not. But I will just name two in particular, and actually this makes perfect sense, because Nancy and I actually both know these two incredible men.
I just met them when I was in Israel last month.
Yeah, and they're two of the main subjects of this documentary. One of them is a man named Aziz, whose brother was killed in front of him when he was a child by the IDF. The other is, and Aziz is Palestinian. Maoz is the other gentleman. He's Jewish, Israeli. His parents were killed on October 7th. The two of these guys, and I'm telling stories that I actually have never told in public before, but it took me a while to agree to join this project because I do have a lot of feelings about language is important, and I think we'll get into some of that a little bit later, but language is really important. Understanding like lack of parity is really important. There's a lot of things, and this is a short film too. And so I felt, and to their credit, the editors and the director took my notes and implemented a lot of where I was having some problems. But Aziz and I actually had a conversation about this, and he reminded me that there are different entry points for everybody. For some people, I'm sure some people in this room, you are so well aware, you know the history, you could come up here and like teach a class. For other people, this is brand new. There was no awareness. I mean, to your point too, Nancy, I mean, you've been there, and it's like the idea of Palestine and Palestinian, the struggle, like didn't enter in, and no judgment. It was designed that way, right? So this is a film, to me, that is really intended to be for people who are coming into this space, maybe a little more new, a little more fresh. And it is very much about not necessarily just saying peace and like feel good, mushy stuff, but really talking about what a just peace looks like, what safety for both people looks like, and understanding that we can't talk about coexistence in a time when the existence of one is what it is. So anyway, this is the trailer to The Path Forward.
All of us want to stop the killing of our children and your children.
We are crying for the world to act now before it will be too late. What happened to my parents on October 7th? Some nights I cried throughout the night.
If somebody kills your brother, you want to hurt whoever hurts your family.
Every relationship that I will be able to build with Palestinians, it's very meaningful.
It didn't matter to me that his parents were Jewish. Those who were killed were my people too.
At this time of great pain, you choose to be together.
If not now, when?
I wanted to break the cycle of incitement, hatred, violence, revenge, rinse and repeat.
How can we move further away from this hashtag stand with Palestine or a hashtag stand with Israel?
If we are not able to grieve the loss of our humanity together, we will never be able to plan a future together.
Those who believe that bombs will bring safety, they are naive. They are naive.
We lost our compass of humanity, and we need to bring that back.
The idea that I should care more about a dead child who happens to be of someone who shares my nationality as opposed to someone who does not is insane to me.
וואו, אלפי תושבים הגיעו לתרום מזון וסיוע לתושבים של עזה.
people say it, how can we work together? I mean, what other choice do we have?
I'd like to introduce our guest this evening.
So many Palestinians and Israelis started and shared the mission that this war will be the last war.
Okay, thank you. I have a few questions for the panel myself, but you have cards, and Mara Bim is our program director at Faith Commons for about another few hours, because she's joining the staff of Royal Lane Baptist Church as their first Justice and Advocacy Fellow, so that's exciting. Yes. And another of our board members is Social Justice Coordinator for Temple Emmanuel. Where's Erica? Erica Matzel. And she is helping on this side, Mara on this side. So if you have cards, wave them and they'll get them and bring them up to me, and we'll see about that. Now, so thank you very much for all you've shared so far. And we said we're not going to go try to adjudicate the history and fix all of that tonight. But we do want to talk about what's possible. And I think it would be interesting to hear from each of you, what do you think, based upon your experiences with Israel and Palestine and U.S. government involvement, are some of the biggest roadblocks to progress in this? Where are the pinch points? Go ahead and name them, and let's talk about them. Ron, I think you're bursting ready.
So I think the United States is a massive, massive, massive issue in all of this. I'm going to just say, and this is not a political discussion, but I am just going to share, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I only mention that to say it is not a Republican or Democrat issue. In fact, I don't know if folks heard, I helped elect Joe Biden in 2020, and I don't know that I felt the rage that I felt toward him and the administration. Anyway, but some of y'all may have seen Matt Miller, who is like evil out of central casting. That man came out. He was part of the Biden administration. Came out, I guess it was just last week, on a podcast and said, "Oh yeah, the Israeli government is definitely committing war crimes." After he stood behind the seal of the president for over a year and was condescending and horrible and made everybody feel like we were all crazy because we were seeing what we saw and knew what we knew. But again, I just say this has not historically been a partisan issue. But the United States gives a blank check to the state of Israel every year. Without without the last almost 2 years, $3.8 billion to be exact. I don't want anybody calling me a liar. $3.8 billion every year, no strings attached. They can do literally whatever they want with it. Any other country that receives aid, funding, et cetera, from the United States is required to follow a number of laws, including international humanitarian law and including U.S. laws, not the state of Israel. Literally can do whatever they want with it, to whomever they want. I am an American citizen. I do have dual citizenship. When I have to fly into Tel Aviv, or if I'm coming over the bridge from Amman, from Jordan, I get detained almost every time. The exception is when my darling blonde-haired, blue-eyed white husband is with me. It's a little bit less, intense, but there's still things. So the fact that, and I'm an American, I was born here. I was born in West Texas, y'all. I mean, I'm a Lubbock girl. And this is what I go through. So imagine what Palestinians who don't have Israeli citizenship go through, or Palestinians who do even have Israeli citizenship go through. So, and again, fully funded, excused, et cetera, by the United States. I am a firm believer that if the US stopped enabling this behavior, there would have to be a real conversation, a real negotiation about what does ending apartheid look like? What does a just peace look like? What does it mean? I mean, we can talk about two states and all the other things, even though the Knesset voted absolutely not on a two-state solution. So putting that to the side for a moment. Anyway, that's my plug. The United States is complicit, the United States is a problem, and the United States continues to uphold this system. Yeah, there's that.
I mean, I will, from a kind of different angle, say that I think a big problem is when we keep talking about there being two sides and referring to the two sides being Israeli and Palestinian sides, when I think really the two sides are we looking for a solution? Do we want peace, or are we just looking for excuses to continue to fund the industrial military complex and have more wars and exert our influence and our power over others? So, I mean, I think those are the two sides. And again, I was just in Israel at a peace conference with Israelis and the Palestinians who could get there because it was in Jerusalem. And this wasn't foreigners. This wasn't people from outside of Israel. These were Israelis, thousands of them. And they want peace. They're on the same side. They are not on opposite sides. So I think that's a big issue, that we think about the two sides in a way that is not helping us.
I think, I mean, on top of that, like you said, I mean, I think it's just the governmental things. Again, like I said, the people who are there, they want peace. I mean, I have so many Jewish friends who have peace. I mean, obviously you want peace, and unfortunately, the governments, like you said, I mean, I think, Netanyahu is keeping this going on because he doesn't want to give up his power, right? So again, whatever it takes for that is what it'll be. And for me, it's surprising now. I mean, I can say anything. I mean, I was born and raised here in the U.S. I can say I can burn a U.S. flag here, and they're not going to do anything to me. But heaven forbid I say anything. Before Trump, anyways. But again, it's just so surprising now. Again, like they're using anti-Semitism now, as a defense mechanism kind of deal. And again, I mean, it's shocking here, in the U.S. Like I said, we can say anything, not anything against Trump, but something against. There's always been that you're able to, to protest and actively engage. But now, I mean, things have been so extreme that again, like I said, I mean, for me, like I said, I went there twice. I said, if I go again, I don't know if I'm going to be let back in. I was born and raised here. I have no place else to go, But again, it's one of those situations that, again, if you even think about helping humanity in any way possible, like you said, I mean, you've gone and, everyone there wants peace except the governments, unfortunately.
Well,
majority.
That's an exaggeration. I'm not
majority,
sure.
Though.
Depends which question you ask. But there are people who do. And, to your point about what's going on in this country, that is, again, a big concern of mine, is that anti-Semitism is being weaponized to take away our civil rights, our First Amendment rights, our ability to say what we want to say and protest our government if we want to. And I think, again, we need to pay attention to what's going on. I think it's pretty obvious now, hard to ignore what's happening in this country, and just an unfortunate example of the close relationship between Israel and the United States.
So we're going to talk about the future in a few moments, but I think, watching, Nimmer, what you showed us and what we've all been hearing about and concerned about, whether it's primarily about the hostages and their care, or children and 55,000 dead in Gaza, and the incredibly harsh conditions on the West Bank. What do we want right now? What can be done to create some safety, to create some space, to advocate? What are you doing, and what can we do to advocate for this, and this as we stand right in this moment? What should we be calling for?
I mean, no question, an immediate ceasefire.
Immediate ceasefire.
To let the aid in, to release the hostages as well. Again, I think that's being weaponized. And again, like I said, I think, both sides, I mean, I think the Palestinian side is saying, we just want a complete ceasefire and not a temporary ceasefire that you can come back in and that you can attack. You give us a complete ceasefire, we'll give you the hostages, let this be done, and then we can sit down and figure out how to go forward from this.
Okay.
But again, until there's a complete and permanent ceasefire, again, there's, like I said, I mean, I went there, I was so happy to see a ceasefire, and everyone was there was so happy to see a ceasefire. And one of the nurses that I still keep in contact on WhatsApp, he's strong and this and that kind of, and then so like after it started up again, I think in April, he reached out to me and he said, can I talk to him? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. He's like, I have no one else to talk to. He said, I'm done. He's like, how many times can I, it's an emotional roller coaster for these people. So again, so the issue is that, they're like, we finally had a ceasefire and now it's start all over again. He's like, I can't continue to do this. And so unfortunately, I mean, not until you get a permanent ceasefire is anything going to, any other negotiation, any other talks can go on.
I mean, I definitely agree, and I think that the operative word is permanent ceasefire. And I do want to name something that got almost zero coverage. I think no coverage in the mainstream media. Some new media and more like independent media did cover it. But there is this negotiation happening, and it's so, like, when I say it out loud, it sounds crazy, so I'm sorry for laughing, but Hamas literally demanded that in the negotiation, they be removed from leadership. Israel demanded that they be put back. I need people to understand this because we're talking about Netanyahu, and I am my husband makes fun of me. He says if I sit on my hands, I can't talk. I apologize. I'm a very animated person, but he's a monster. His cabinet, his administration, they're monsters. But I do think it's really, really important. Just a little side note here. It did not start with Netanyahu either. And it's not like, oh, we get rid of Netanyahu and everything's great. That's not true. He should be in prison. We can all, well, I think we can all agree on that, maybe? Most of us. Which is part of why he continues all of this. I mean, the invasions, the bombing, not even just of Gaza, because he's protecting himself and trying to keep himself out of prison. But I just need folks to understand that Netanyahu himself has funded Hamas to keep them in place. It has already come out that he was aware that October 7th was going to happen. And let's be honest, y'all, it doesn't make it any less atrocious. It doesn't take any of that away. But this is ostensibly the most robust intelligence in the world between them and their allies. He knew, but it's the perfect excuse to do exactly what he's wanted to do, which is ethnically cleanse Palestinians out of the state of Israel and keep the very, very right-wing fringe of his government happy. And so, I'm sorry for the tangent, but permanent ceasefire, and yes, release of all hostages, including Palestinian prisoners who are being unlawfully held, and of course, the immediate, unimpeded delivery of aid. And the other thing too is the number, and nobody knows this better than you, the number of medical evacuations that are required just for children. The conservative count is 16,000 children that are in desperate need of being emergency evacuations, and they cannot get out. And that is very conservative. It's very likely way, way more. So anyway, those are some starting points.
Okay.
Well, I will repeat, permanent ceasefire, release the hostages, yes. But, we, other than clamoring for that and calling our reps and doing everything we can do in terms of our personal ability to advocate for that, we can be lifting up these stories of peace building and refusing to capitulate to the rhetoric that says there is no possibility for a ceasefire. If this doesn't happen, we can't have a ceasefire. If that doesn't happen, we can't release the hostages. We just can't accept that just on a individual, whatever your platform is, on social media, at your dining room table, whatever your platform is. Like, we need to start saying, this is not, those things are not true. We have to start from the ground up. We have to start making places safe to have conversations like tonight. We have to make we can't make Gazan children safe, and we can't make Israelis safe, and but we can make each other safe. And we can start with that instead of contributing to an atmosphere where everyone feels unsafe. And when we feel like, think about how many people, I don't know about you, I think about how many people that I know personally who have recently said, I'm thinking about getting a gun. Think about it. People who would have never said that, right? How can you keep yourself safe? We have to really disabuse ourselves first, and then be talking about how that is not a solution, that will not help, that will not make us feel safer. And I think if we start with ourselves and with our own communities, hopefully it will build and eventually make its way through the other channels.
So, building on what you've said in that respect, and raising up the voices of those who are seeking to do peace, this reminds me that one of the principles we operate under with Faith Commons is a principle of good, healthy interfaith conversation, and that is, do not characterize someone else's religion by the worst possible adherence of it. You would not want that to be true of them for you. But what we see happening in this often is a kind of casting of an entire people around certain bad actors, right? We see it happening in Los Angeles right now. So massive peaceful protests, a few who engage in violence, and Elon Musk puts the picture up and says, this is what's going on, right? Talk to people there, that's not what's going on. But it's important, whether it's those conflicts or this conflict, I think, or within our religions, that we operate under that kind of principle, which leads to the question of religion and faith. It was raised in the questions here, how much has religion contributed to the conflict, and how can religion begin to move us through it, or can it? What are your thoughts?
I'm happy to start because, shocker, I've got so many feelings. This is another place where I get real salty, so apologies. You're getting all my emotions tonight.
She's always like this, I just want to say.
It's not untrue.
Not just tonight. Am I right? Am I right?
Oh, it's not untrue. I'm trying to find loving words. It drives me crazy when this is turned into a religious conflict, because it's not. The intent is for all of us to divide us among religion, and and I'll just say my immediate family is Catholic. I have Muslim family members as well. I honestly don't care. The intentionality behind dividing us by religion is so deep and so many decades long. And I always, even among my own community, frankly, I am constantly reminding people, every Palestinian is not Muslim, and every Muslim is not Palestinian, or Arab for that matter. And so to divide it along, and we even saw, sorry to get into like the weeds, but the mayor of East Jerusalem literally going on television, US and Israeli, saying there are no Christians in Gaza, there are no churches in Gaza. Why does she do that? Why does she do that? It's so intentional. It's so intentional to worm their way into our, frankly, like we all have unintended, I shouldn't say we all, a lot of us have unintended biases that live in our brains. And so we can unintentionally, even with like all the biggest heart and the biggest love in the world, go, oh, okay, that's what this is. They're fighting that enemy because that's an acceptable enemy to us. And it's so, I'm sorry, it's vile and it's disgusting. And I'm just not okay with it. It's not a religious conflict. They want us to believe it's a religious conflict, and I'm going to stop right there.
So again, I mean, I think if you look at the history, back in the day, when Prophet Muhammad, when he was there, again, Jews and Muslims were able to live in peace and harmony. And
Christians.
And Christians, yeah, sorry. So yeah, so I mean, everyone can live in peace and harmony, but like you said, I mean, they're trying to make it into a Judeo-Christian thing versus a Muslim thing. And like I said, I mean, all faiths, they say that we should all live in peace. All of them are saying that, you should love for your brother what you love for yourself. From my standpoint, like I said, I'm not a Palestinian. Again, I was born and raised here. My folks from Pakistan. I have nothing, like I said, for Palestine. When I went to Haiti, it wasn't because I was Haitian or anything of that sort. When I went to Guatemala, I mean, that's that. So again, I mean, unfortunately, people try to use religion always to fight wars, the Crusades, like I said, Muslims take over, all these kinds of things. So unfortunately, religion has always been used to fund wars or to make wars. And unfortunately, that's not, if you look at all religions, like we should be able to live in peace and harmony with each other. So, I mean, I don't think that there's any religion that's saying, oh, we want to take over, well, I'm not going to say that. I mean, I'm going to say, from our standpoint, I mean, in Islam, we should be able to live in peace and harmony. The first thing that we say is salam alaikum to each other, peace be upon you. So again, if you kill one of humanity, if you kill one person, it's as if you've killed all of humanity. If you save one person, it's like you save all of humanity. So why do I go to do these things? If I'm able to help one person out, maybe I will be, granted heaven because I did something good for one person in this life.
One very quick story, just that you made me think of. I spent the first few years of my life in Nazareth, actually. My grandfather was very ill, my mom's dad, so we were living there until I was almost 7, or a little after 7, whatever. I was young. And I remember my grandmother telling me stories about how pre-1948, they lived literally side by side with their Jewish neighbors, and they breastfed each other's children, y'all. I mean, there's nothing closer than that. So this whole idea that like we're divided among or whatever, it's just not true. I'm done now, really. I hope not.
I think what contributes to this mythology about the role of religion, in part, is that, this idea that we shouldn't mix religion and politics. Because it turns out that only certain kinds of religious people say that, right? When it comes to fanatics, they are perfectly willing to mix religion and politics, right? Like, in their sanctuaries, in their, communities. So I think we have to it's very hard. We're really struggling with this right now in the United States on, how we're going to keep religious communities, faith communities together and not being divisive. And I think it's really important to find a way to talk about politics and policy without being partisan, but to come back to our faith values and to acknowledge and to lift up those values that don't call for our hatred of one another and our divisiveness and our wars against each other and our, triumphalism over each other, but rather the call to us to live together in wholeness for the good of all of us.
I mean, as the Christian standing here, to address this, I would have to say as a confession that Christian Zionists American evangelicals are some of the people that are creating the most problems and obstacles for peace in the Middle East. And this is rooted in our theology, the way we read the Bible, and the way some people read it as if it were a roadmap to the future. There are Palestinian Christians who are friends of mine who feel deeply betrayed by American Christians because of the sense that they have no right to stand in the way of God's plan, which includes essentially a carte blanche for the state of Israel. They see the state of Israel as the instrument of the end times for God, and while that is received well by many in Israel because they can, are glad to have all the friends and donations they can get, at the same time, most of them, well, some of them at least, understand the duplicity of that because in the end, really, Christians get heaven, Jews get a second chance, but otherwise you just get the land for a time and then you go to hell. And I'm sorry, that's the theology. And a lot of it started right here in Dallas, Texas, at Dallas Theological Seminary, and has been fomented for generations in our churches. So that has to be challenged. All I'm saying is all of our religions have to be self-critical. So we have to ask what in our religions fosters a universal care for human rights and human dignity, and what is about our own privilege and our own, future at the expense of someone else. Nancy, did you have something?
No, I mean, I was just going to say, and all of our religions also predate the modern nation state and all of the, the things that go along with that. Not to say that there weren't other forms of government that were equally corrupt, but our religions are not tied to any one of those.
Right. So I want to ask a question. Some of these I'm just sort of collating and like pulling ideas from each of your questions, but language is sometimes an obstacle for us, and I don't mean, Hebrew and Arabic. I mean the language we use to describe the way things are and other people. So what counsel do you have for us when people use language around this conflict that is for them an expression of their passion and desire, and yet it is received by others as a red stop sign? We can't talk to each other because of it. How do we deal with some of those language barriers in dealing with this so that we can find a way to converse with one another? Do I need to name some of them?
Sure.
No, I mean, I've got a whole list.
Okay, all right.
Which actually, I'm so glad you asked this question. And you go, one of y'all are going to have to start at some point. I apologize, I keep jumping in. But I'm so glad you asked this question. And I'm going to tell on myself now, too, because I'm one of those people that bristles. And I get triggered almost by, and I sort of quickly mentioned language earlier, and it's exactly what you're asking. And even the word conflict, which I know, and even the word war, and these are such easy words to grab for. So there is the very human part of me that understands why these words are used. But in the terms conflict and war, there is an insinuation of parity. There is an insinuation of maybe not 100% evenness, but some. Whether it's funding, whether it's weaponry, whether it's access. Parity is the best word I think I can come up with, but that is the sort of, to me, that is the insinuation when we use those kinds of words, is that it's two sides that have generally equal access to all of these things I just mentioned, and that's what's sort of happening in the moment. And the reality is, and again, predating, and I know we're not doing the whole history lesson, but this is not new, there is no parity. There's none. And of course, we're seeing like that reality on steroids at the moment, but the thing is, settlement expansion in the West Bank has been happening for years. Land being taken from Palestinian people in modern times, like in our, like now, is still happening. It's been happening for years. My grandfather on my mother's side, most of his land was taken. He was able to get some of it back. And my great aunt still lives on the land. It's the smallest piece of land. And this woman is like magical when it comes to growing things. She grows everything in this tiny little plot of land. And I just, like, her face is literally a map of the world. She's lived a very hard life. And hearing my grandparents, my relatives who are still alive, who experienced the Nakba, there has been no parity since then, since 1948. I mean, again, this is not new. In Gaza, before October 7th, the Israeli government controlled when their electricity turned on and off. That's not parity. You know, when settlers can come take land, going back to the West Bank now, take land away from people who have lived there sometimes for 100, 200 more years, with the Israeli military standing by and watching, that's not parity. So I say all these things just for us to kind of think about our language, but also, again, telling myself in this moment too, and to Nancy's constant lesson to me, which I so appreciate, creating safe spaces to like have this conversation and not immediately shut down, but to be able to sort of say, okay, this is why. And some people are going to hear it and some people aren't, and that's my journey to take. But I do think it is important to understand that there is power behind language, and there is meaning behind language. We can't, just sort of using the words because they're easiest to pull is not always the best move. And I mentioned also even the word coexisting and coexistence is really oftentimes used, and I'm obviously not at all opposed to coexistence, but and this is myself, Jewish allies, Israeli allies too, we're pushing toward co-resistance versus coexistence. Yes, we want to get to coexistence, but we've got to resist together first. And it is a together thing because, and I will be the first person to say, like, Palestinians we're not going to do this on our own. It's just not possible. If it was, we'd already done it. And so this comes back to collective liberation because it's good for everybody. But these are the kinds of things that I'm constantly thinking about and would invite all of us to think about.
Well, just to respond to something you just said, I mean, Palestinians aren't going to do it alone, and Jews aren't going to do it alone either. And I think that this sort of illusion that somehow we're getting support from people like the evangelical Christian community that's going to actually result in good things for the Jews, or of all things, the president who's so playing us, right? And we're just, falling into that hand. That's really, really troubling. So I'm going to give you an example of a language thing. And what I think is with language, we have to ask, what do you mean? Like, if you can't, unfortunately, like, it's a real problem. Like, what are you going to say anymore? It's almost like you don't want to say anything anymore. But I had a conversation over text with someone, a Palestinian who I invited to come tonight. And she said, well, has your organization, Faith Commons, come out and said this is a genocide, that what's going on in Gaza is a genocide? And I said, no, we haven't, and we won't. I said, my personal opinion is I can see why somebody would call it a genocide, but we're not going to do that because we are trying to open conversations and not close them. And she said, well, I can't come to your event. And I'm like, okay, fine. You know what? You have your boundary. But that's why I appreciate you, Rania, because you are willing to have the conversation. We can talk about what these things mean, and we can get to understand each other and recognize that we really are trying to achieve the same outcome, and we have the same values to bring us there, but we're negotiating between our communities and our sphere of influence, and trying to figure out how the best way for me as an individual, you as an individual, can do that. So I mean, I think the thing about language is that we just have to slow down and ask people to explain what they mean. When they say, what's a Zionist? Well, ask somebody what they mean when they say they're a Zionist or an anti-Zionist. What do you mean? I mean, what do you mean?
Yeah, everyone does not fall into the same definition, right, when you say Zionist, nor when people say Free Palestine.
Correct.
Or from the river to the sea. Those become flashpoints for people, but there are people on both sides who desire for the entirety of that land to belong to them. And this particular evening is about two peoples, one land. And so I think the final question, and thank you for all your good questions, we can't do it all tonight.
We'll continue the conversation.
We'll continue the conversation.
If you want to.
But let's go back to the title of this evening and ask you to imagine and to draw out from your own vision of things, what would be your hopes and dreams of how two people can inhabit one land?
Somebody else has to start.
I'll start. I mean, frankly, I don't think it's up to me. I mean, I just think that's something that's going to have to be worked out among people who live in Israel and Palestine. I'm working on how we're going to live together here in the country I live in. That I'm all about. I am not going to. My goal in terms of Israel and Palestine is to not create obstacles for Israelis and Palestinians to work it out together.
I mean, I would agree. And like I said, we can say whatever we want here, but again, it has to be between them. And obviously, the main thing is that, like I said, if you look at both religions or all three religions, again, I mean, there is a majority that is similar. I mean, the rules and regulations, everything. Again, love for your neighbor what you love for yourself. Don't kill your neighbor. Islam is like, if your neighbor is going hungry, you should feed them per se. So, again, if we look at the more commonalities versus the few differences that we have, I mean, people can live together. But like I said, it should be between them how they're going to live together. Because for me here saying, oh, you should be doing this, that, and the other, and again, a Palestinian who's like, oh, well, I have to wait in line to cross a checkpoint for 8 hours. I can't do that. I mean, they have to figure out how they can live in peace and harmony. But again, there's something definitely that needs to be done between them.
I am a citizen of both countries, so I am going to say a little more. And I'm going to get just a little bit in the weeds on it too, because, and we sort of touched on it, like the problem in government and leadership, and frankly, it's not just here and it's not just in Israel, it's like all over the world. We live on a planet where rarely do governments actually represent the people. And it's true, I think, for Israelis, and it's definitely true for Palestinians. And I'm talking about the PA also, the Palestinian Authority, that they're a joke. They're essentially like an arm of the Israeli government. They do nothing. It's terrible. I'm also going to share a name with everybody here. The name is Marwan Barghouti. And this is a man who has been in an Israeli prison for 23 years. He is, the easiest way I can say this is he is our Nelson Mandela. He is over and over and over again the most popular leader among Palestinians, who is the most capable of bringing the faction, just like they're in this country, Palestinians are not all agreeing on everything, but he is literally the most capable person of bringing all sides together to have a real negotiation, to truly talk, I'm getting very technical and I apologize, but to truly talk about coexistence and a just peace and what it looks like to live together. And he is sitting in prison. Does anybody in here think that that's not on purpose? And I have to tell you, even among my own community here in this country, he's not brought up anymore. I am like on an active mission to bring his name back to the forefront. There, back home, he is very much.
All the time.
He's talked about all the time. His family is like amazing. Frankly, I want to be best friends with his wife. We haven't gotten there yet, but I'm very close to his son. She's amazing. So his whole family's amazing. I don't mean to take anything away from the boys, but this man has been disappeared, and so even in this country, people who still have family there that are Palestinians with family there, they don't bring him up. And again, it's on purpose. So when we talk about failure in leadership and all of those kinds of things, there is a narrative, especially in this country, that there's no leadership among Palestinians. There's nobody, and it's not true. It's not true. He's just sitting in prison because that's where they want him to be. Obviously, the same has to happen on the Israeli side, too. Again, I said earlier, this didn't start with him. Getting rid of him is not the only thing. Like, we have to have a change in leadership, like a leadership that actually is interested in getting us there, not in keeping themselves out of prison, not in like adhering to the craziest of the most right-wing. I mean, y'all, if y'all don't know who Ben Gvir and Smotrich are, oh God, I mean, homophobic, misogynistic, hateful, just trolls. And that's who he's answering, that's who Netanyahu's answering to. So there has to be a sea change among the leadership. I've got my favorite on the Palestinian side. There are great people on the Israeli side too, but that to me is we can't go anywhere without that.
So I think we've come to a place where we should say thank you to our speakers tonight. We are really grateful not only for who you are, but for what you do and for how you inspire us to do more. And that's the next thing. There are QR codes, 2 of them, around where you can see on the table back here, Julio has one. Upstairs, as you leave, you can find them also. One of them is going to take you to a host of resources. Do you want to be educated? Do you want to read? Do you want to see videos? Do you want to really learn more in categories? There's information there, and we really encourage you to do that so that you can become better informed and a better advocate for peace. The second is for Faith Commons. This evening actually cost us quite a bit, including security, by the way, because these issues are becoming, terribly volatile for people. You have demonstrated something beautiful tonight, and thank you for the way you have. But we invite you to see our website, and if you would like to donate, we'd be grateful for that as well. But mostly for your support and prayers for the work that we're doing and encouragement. We thank you for all your encouragement. Any other words from anyone? I think we're good to go. Thank you for this evening. Take care.